No one knows exactly when the notion of building a Great Wall came into the emperor's mind or why he decided to build it. One legend has it that one of his soothsayers predicted his dynasty would fall at the hands of a northern barbarian tribe. Others relate to dreams, omens, and the emperor's inclination to build prodigious monuments to his own glory whenever possible. We do know that around the time he unified China, Qin Shi Huangdi placed General Meng Tian, an energetic and successful military officer, in charge of building a great wall that would separate the civilized people and fertile lands of China from the barbarians and demons said to inhabit the barren steppes to the north. The wall was to stretch from the Yellow Sea in the east to the Gobi Desert in the west. It was to be 24 feet high in places and wide enough for 8 men to march abreast along its top. The wall was to follow natural features of the land whenever possible, and never to flow in a straight line because demons were believed to travel only in straight lines and were therefore unable to cross crooked lines or turn corners. The construction of the wall varied greatly in technique from place to place, and very little remains of Qin Shi Huangdi's wall to tell us how it was done, though many scholars believe it served as a pattern for future walls built on its foundation. Meng Tian probably began with the towers. Made of brick or stone with a stone or rubble base, they were generally about 40 feet high and 40 feet square at the base, tapering to 30 feet square at the summit. Once the towers were complete, they were joined by a stone curtain, a demon barrier, to keep out invaders and evil spirits. Garrison towers large enough to hold hundreds of troops were stationed the length of 2 arrow shots apart, so that all of the territory in between was covered. The towers protruded from the wall like turrets so defenders could fire at attackers along the wall's base. It is estimated that the Qin under General Meng constructed several hundred miles of new wall. The rest of the barrier was made up of already existing walls, which were joined and incorporated into its body.
And essentially what he was doing was linking a series of earlier walls which the warring states had already built against the nomads in the north. I would say they absolutely followed the rammed earth technique. It's the only technique they knew. They may have done it bigger, or taller, wider, but it's no different in construction techniques from the Neolithic walls.
In the eastern mountains, dry earth was pounded between 2 wall faces of brick or stone until it was of a sufficient level and solid. Then a layer of brick or stone was laid on top to seal it against rain and make a roadway. Further west, where the land is made of a fine silt called yellow earth or loess, laborers poured the soil mixed with water into wooden frames and rammed it into a solid structure as it dried. On the arid western plain, the wall was built from layers of palm fronds, reeds, and gravel held together with mud, ending at the edges of the great desert, beyond which lay the demon-haunted wilderness known to the Chinese as Kuwai, outside the passes. General Meng built the first Great Wall in less than 10 years, completing it sometime before 210 BC. But already stories had begun to circulate calculating its cost in terms of human suffering and human lives. The massive manpower necessary to build the Great Wall was recruited by forced conscription from the peasantry, supplemented with criminals, captured soldiers, defeated nobles, scholars, and other so-called enemies of the sovereign. It has been said that every 3rd man in the empire was pressed into service, and of every 10 recruited, only 3 returned home. Legend tells that the emperor ordered that any man found taking a nap on the wall should be buried alive in it.
The popular memory of wall building is of peasants being rounded up, being sent off to work, never coming back, dying in some remote wilderness, slaving away. It's an absolutely horrible story, and the legend is that the bodies of workers who died were simply tossed into the the middle part of the wall between the masonry where you just had rubble. This outrage, or this popular feeling, expressed itself in a variety of poems, but perhaps most famously in this legend of Lady Meng.
One of the great stories that kids studied in school in the early first 20 years of communist rule was the parable of this woman going to find her husband, who Qin Shi Huang had sent to the wall to work as a form of slave labor, and she finds that he's dead and probably buried in the wall, as many people were. So in that sense, the wall was viewed as an artifact of feudal oppression, built by the sweat of ordinary people under the whiplash of this tyrant. Now, we find it's exactly the opposite. And the Great Wall has been transformed into this symbol of China's greatness, the longevity of its civilization, and representing a country of great power, history, and consequence.
When construction fell behind schedule, one of his seers told the emperor the wall would never be completed unless 10,000 men were buried alive in it. Feeling he couldn't spare 10,000 workers, Qin Shi Huangdi solved the problem by finding one man whose name included the Chinese character for 10,000 and entombed him in the wall instead. It is estimated that more than 1 million men worked on the wall during its years of construction under deplorable conditions, and there can be no doubt that thousands of them died of exposure, exhaustion, and starvation. Even today, stories persist that their bodies were buried where they fell, interred forever inside the longest cemetery on Earth. Less than a decade had passed since the unification of China. Other vast changes had occurred. Great public works projects, canals, roads, and agricultural programs had been successfully completed. Now, with the Great Wall in place, Qin Shi Huangdi boasted that his empire was invincible. But the Chinese have a saying: when things have reached their peak, they decline. Even as the Great Wall was under construction, Qin Shi Huangdi descended further into mysticism and madness. In 213 BC, he decided that history should begin with him and ordered that all copies of books of history and classical literature be burned. Any person found to be in possession of such books 30 days after the decree was to be shipped off to do forced labor on the Great Wall or be buried alive. An estimated 460 scholars perished. When the emperor's eldest son and heir disagreed with the policy, he too was exiled to the north to assist General Meng. As he grew older, the emperor's obsession with his own death intensified.